The first snowfall of winter had always been Aria's favorite time of year. Crisp air, crystalline silence, a fresh start painted in white. But this year, the snow felt like a burial shroud. She stood barefoot in the ceremonial clearing, the cold biting into her skin like punishment. Her white dress, thin ceremonial lace, clung to her body, now damp at the hem where snow melted against her ankles. The moonlight caught the silver embroidery meant to symbolize purity, fate, and new beginnings. Ironic, really. Every pack member stood in a loose circle around her, cloaked in heavy wool, their expressions unreadable or grim. Aria scanned the sea of faces, hoping for a kind one, a single ally. Her former childhood friend Mira averted her gaze. Elder Jonah's lip curled in distaste. Even Luna Helena, the beta's wife, narrowed her eyes like Aria was some parasite who'd clung too long to the pack's charity. Only the alpha, Ramon, seemed vaguely bored. Then he spoke, his voice clear and final. Jordan Cross, step forward and confirm your intention before the moon. Jordan moved with confident strides, the way he always had. Beta-born, son of privilege, golden favorite of Ashwood, he wore a ceremonial black tunic, his blonde hair tied neatly at the nape of his neck. The mark of rank, a silver pin in the shape of a crescent, glinted at his collarbone. He looked like the perfect heir, except the man Aria once knew, who used to sneak her pastries from the kitchens, who once told her he'd never reject her no matter what the pack said, was long gone. And I, Jordan Cross of the Ashwood Pack, he said, voice booming through the clearing, eject you, Aria Winters, as my mate. It was like being punched in the chest by a ghost. Her breath stilled, her ribcage tightening as her wolf whimpered inside her mind, stunned and broken. The silence that followed wasn't shocked. No one gasped, no one cried out in protest. They'd known, all of them. They'd expected it. Aria's legs wobbled, but she didn't fall. Jordan didn't even look at her. Instead, he turned toward Maris Hellwood, Alpha Ramon's niece, her platinum hair cascading down her back, her ruby-red ceremonial dress hugging every curve. She stepped forward, lips curved in victory. He took her hand in front of everyone. Aria flinched as their bond, the golden thread between destined mates, unraveled, the last fraying connection between her and Jordan snapping like a whip. A sharp, twisting pain shot through her chest. It was worse than heartbreak. It was instinct being ripped away. And still, she stood. She would not cry. She would not fall. She would not beg. Ton, Alpha Ramon declared, his voice flat. Tinta bond is broken. Aria Winters is no longer under pack protection. As per Ashwood law, she shall be processed within the hour and auctioned accordingly. That was when it happened. The laughter. Someone snickered, then another, and then a cruel chorus of it, like hyenas circling a wounded deer. Did you really think he'd keep you? An Omega with no family, no wolf strength, no real value? Sinai heard she still sleeps in the servant quarters. Pathetic. She turned toward them, face expressionless, blood humming in her ears. She should have spoken, screamed, told them how the bond had been real, how she and Jordan had shared dreams once, promises, how fate had chosen them. But the words dried in her throat. Instead, she said the only thing that mattered, "Ascend, let me go." Alpha Ramon's brows rose in mock amusement. You misunderstand, girl. You're no longer protected by Ashwood, but you still carry pack blood, which makes you property, and we don't just let property walk free. That's when the enforcers stepped forward. No, wait. She backed up, but a hand grabbed her arm, yanking her forward. "Untranquil," someone ordered. She barely registered the sharp sting at her neck before her vision blurred, her knees buckled, and the last thing she saw was the silver moon above. Cold, distant, and indifferent. She woke up in a transport cage, the kind used for rogue wolves and violent outlaws. The scent of iron, sedatives, and fear saturated the air. Her head pounded from the trank. Her wrists were bound in soft restraints lined with silver thread, not enough to burn, but enough to weaken. A second cage was beside hers. Inside was a girl, no older than 15, shaking uncontrollably. Her mate mark still glowed faintly on her neck, fresh. Her eyes were wide with trauma. "So many did they take this time?" a voice muttered from the shadows. An older Omega. Her tone was dull, numb, like someone who had stopped dreaming long ago. Aria tried to speak, but her throat was dry. The truck rolled forward. They were driving through the night, toward the auction. The warehouse didn't look like much from the outside. Rusted metal walls, barbed wire fencing, and a cracked parking lot that hadn't seen maintenance in years. But inside, it was polished opulence. Crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains, gold-plated cages, each more grotesquely decorative than the last. It was a playground for the wealthy and wicked, a place where laws bent to the will of those who could afford to buy them. Aria sat on the cold floor of a holding pen, her ceremonial dress torn at the sleeve. The thin silk offered no protection from the chill in the air, but that wasn't why she was shaking. It was the silence. Controlled, pristine, the kind of silence that came before a storm. A handler passed by her cage, clipboard in hand. Lot 9th, he muttered, checking her wrist cuff. Unmated Omega. Virgin. Formerly bonded but rejected. No alpha bond imprint remaining. No previous owners. Starting bid, $200,000. She wanted to scream. That's all she was to them now. A line on a clipboard. A piece of merchandise. Aria pressed her forehead to the cold bars, exhaling slowly. She tried to reach for her wolf, to feel that primal energy deep within her, but it was curled in on itself, hiding, quiet. Ever since the rejection, it hadn't spoken. You're not gone, she thought fiercely. I won't let them break us. We are not just some auction lot. Still, fear festered beneath her ribs, a hollow, creeping thing. They made her bathe next, in a marble-tiled room with 2 armed guards outside and a silent handler inside who never met her eyes. She was given a new dress, black silk this time, thin straps and a high slit, designed to emphasize her figure. She didn't miss the detail. The dress was designed for presentation. Her hair was brushed until it gleamed. Her cheeks were dusted with faint rose powder. Lips tinted a delicate berry red. She looked in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the girl staring back. Not a pack wolf. Not a mate. Not even a person. Just a product. When the curtains opened to the auction floor, a low hum filled the room. Predators. Wealthy alphas lounged in velvet chairs, sipping bourbon and aged scotch. Some were pack leaders, others rogue billionaires, CEOs who had carved empires with claws and blood. Most wore tailored suits, some with open collars to display their marks. Every one of them radiated power and money. There were also women, Luna widows, heirless beta wives. Some looked bored, others leaned forward, assessing. And then there were the Omega brokers, lean, sharp-eyed creatures who whispered into comms and nodded to unseen buyers bidding remotely. Aria's handler tugged gently on her wrist. Head up, shoulders straight, no eye contact. She stepped forward onto the platform under a chandelier, blinking against the light. A voice echoed through the sound system, deep, polished, almost friendly. Lot 9th, rare Omega, rejected by her mate but unbonded and untouched. A fresh start for the discerning buyer. She comes from the Ashwood bloodline, which offers desirable traits for offspring: obedient temperament, pleasing scent profile, and excellent compatibility for bond formation. Heat rose to Aria's cheeks. Every word was a blade. The auctioneer smiled. Let's start the bidding at $200,000. The numbers began flying. Pim 250, said frozen, and numb, and then a pause. Aria stood frozen, numb, as her worth was debated and wagered like a rare piece of art. And then, a pause. A long, sharp silence. See, 500,000, a voice said, smooth as velvet. Every head in the room turned. He walked in like he owned the world. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that hugged a body built not just for business but for war. His black hair was slicked back, his jawline sharp, lips a touch too cruel. His scent cut through the perfume and whiskey. Something dark, dominant, laced with crisp pine and clean smoke. An alpha, and not just any alpha. Aria's breath caught. Even her broken wolf stirred. Kieran Wolf, heir to Wolf Industries, billionaire alpha, CEO of the largest shifter-run corporation on the eastern seaboard. A man whispered about in both boardrooms and rogue circles. Ruthless, brilliant, unmated by choice, and completely out of place in this cesspool of predators. The room hushed, unsure whether to raise the bid. The auctioneer cleared his throat. So we have a new high bid, $500,000 from Mr. Wolf? Do I hear 550? Silence. 550, anyone? No one challenged him. Of course they didn't. Kieran Wolf was not a man to challenge lightly, and going once, going twice, sold. The gavel slammed. Aria exhaled, sharply, involuntarily. Her wrists trembled. She didn't understand. Why him? He didn't speak to her at first. She was led into a private room off the auction floor, her wrists still cuffed, her head spinning. A fireplace crackled softly. Everything smelled of expensive leather and fresh-cut wood. She waited in silence until the door opened, and there he was. Kieran Wolf, even more terrifying up close. His eyes were glacier gray, his energy controlled but enormous, like he could devour the whole room if he wanted. He didn't sit. He stood in front of her, watching. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, voice low and rich. Aria swallowed. "Yes." "Good, because I'm not here to mate you, not here to break you, and I sure as hell didn't pay $500,000 to watch you curl up and die like a broken wolf." She blinked. That wasn't what she expected. He stepped closer. She didn't flinch, but her pulse roared. "When I bought you because you were being sold like cattle in a place that makes me sick, and because you looked me in the eye when every other Omega looked away." Anaria's breath hitched. "So I don't want your submission," he said. "So I want your fire." She didn't know what to say. Her mouth parted slightly, but nothing came out. Then, softly, he added, "You get 1 month. My home. My rules. If you want to leave after that, you'll walk out with freedom papers, fully protected. No auction, no bond." "Why?" she whispered, voice hoarse. Something flickered in his gaze. "And because I hate what they've done to you." Aria didn't know if she was safer now, or in even greater danger than before. Because Kieran Wolf wasn't cruel like Jordan. He wasn't careless like Alpha Ramon. No, he was worse. He cared just enough to make her feel something again. And that might be the most dangerous thing of all. The car was sleek and silent, a matte black luxury SUV that glided through the forested roads like a shadow. The tinted windows blurred the city behind them, the sharp lights of the auction house fading into memory as they drove north, deeper into the territory controlled by no official pack. Aria sat in the back seat, cuffed wrists now covered by a soft wool blanket draped over her lap. A silent driver sat up front, barely sparing her a glance. The man who had bought her sat beside her, though he hadn't spoken since they left. Kieran Wolf was a fortress of silence. Even seated, his presence was overwhelming. Shoulders too broad for the narrow leather seats, thigh brushing against hers when the road curved. She shifted subtly, trying to breathe, trying to keep herself small. But he noticed everything. "Oh, and you're allowed to speak," he said at last, voice like thunder after a long drought. "I didn't know if you wanted silence," she replied, her voice low but steady. She surprised herself. She expected it to shake. His head turned slightly toward her, though his eyes remained forward. "And I didn't buy a statue. I bought a woman who looked me dead in the eyes like she still had fire in her. Don't lose that now." Aria stared at him for a moment. She didn't understand him. Alphas didn't talk like that, especially not to Omegas like her. Rejected, marked as unworthy by their fated mates, considered emotionally unstable and biologically compromised. "And you said you didn't want me for mating," she said quietly. "I don't." He didn't even flinch. "I don't need a mate. I don't need a bed warmer. And I definitely don't need a broken Omega pretending to want what she doesn't." Aria's breath caught. He didn't sugarcoat things. Not the way her old Alpha had. Not the way auction brokers did when they dressed up captivity with words like rescue or second chance. But Kieran Wolf didn't lie, and for the first time in months, she believed a man when he said she had a choice. The estate emerged from the trees like something out of another world. Wolf Manor wasn't just a home, it was a fortress. Black stone and steel, perched on a mountain ledge with panoramic views of the surrounding pines. Long, symmetrical architecture with sharp lines and tall windows. There was no garden, no frivolous flowers. Just clean lines, cold air, and silence. As the SUV pulled up the curved driveway, motion sensors clicked on. Warm light spilled from the foyer like golden syrup, catching the edges of the midnight exterior. The front doors opened before they reached the steps. A woman in her 50s stepped out, short, serious, with thick dark glasses and her gray-streaked hair tied in a knot. She wore a tailored black suit and held a tablet in one hand. "Oh, and Mr. Wolf," she said with a curt nod. Then her gaze shifted to Aria, assessing. "Not unkind, but clinical." "Uns veil," Kieran replied. "See, she's staying in the south wing, full privacy. No surveillance in the suite. Medical attention first, food, bath. She doesn't answer to anyone but me." The woman, Ms. Vale, arched a brow. Understood. Aria followed them inside, footsteps hesitant. Her wolf stirred again, restless, uncertain. The scent of other wolves lingered faintly in the halls. Not current residents, past ones. She could sense it in the bones of the place. It wasn't a home. Not really. It was a place built by someone who didn't trust easily. Like her suite was larger than the house she'd grown up in. It had a fireplace already lit, a 4-poster bed with gray linen, and a clawfoot tub in the adjoining bathroom. The balcony overlooked the pine forest, miles of trees stretching beyond the horizon. No fences, no walls. It looked like freedom. It felt like a cage. "You'll be given keycard access," Ms. Vale said briskly. "And kitchen is open at all hours. Staff won't bother you. Should you need anything, speak to me or Mr. Wolf directly." Aria nodded. Her voice wouldn't work yet. Ms. Vale's eyes softened just enough to become human. "And he may look like the devil," she murmured. "But he's not the monster you think. Not yet." And then she left. Aria soaked in the bath until her fingers pruned. Her reflection rippled in the water, eyes hollow, collarbones sharp, but something flickering just beneath, a fragment of defiance, of want, of life. Her wolf twitched, not quite ready to speak, but no longer silent. She dried off slowly, choosing the softest robe from the closet. Everything in the suite had been tailored for comfort. Soft, clean, luxurious. No cameras, no callers. She wandered to the balcony, drawn by the wind. The moon was low and swollen, casting silver across the tree line. And she felt him, before she saw him. She turned her head slowly, and there he was. Across the courtyard, 2 floors up, standing in his own balcony like some dark sentinel. Shirtless, arms folded, his body carved from something unrelenting, muscle and scars and tension. His gaze was on her. He didn't look away, neither did she. The wind lifted her hair, baring her throat. She didn't know if it was defiance or instinct. He didn't react, didn't dominate, didn't leer. He just watched, like he was waiting to see what she would become. The days passed quietly. Kieran didn't visit, he left her space. But things arrived like clockwork: books, clothes, simple notes. Eat when you're hungry. The chef doesn't mind late nights. And try the North Trail when you're ready. It's safe. Since you don't owe anyone silence anymore. She read every word like a lifeline, each one careful, distant, but oddly thoughtful, as if he was trying to speak without forcing her to listen. And slowly she began to settle, a little. She started walking in the woods, just beyond the Manor's reach. She found a frozen lake, wild berries growing near the edge, and even a hidden garden choked in ivy, long abandoned. Wolf Manor had its secrets, but so did she. One night, just past midnight, she found herself outside his study door. She didn't knock. She stood there, heart pounding, unsure why she had come. She almost turned away. Then the door opened. Kieran stood there, barefoot, holding a glass of whiskey. He didn't look surprised. "And I was wondering when you'd stop hiding," he said. Aria swallowed. "And not hiding." He tilted his head. "No, you're surviving." She lifted her chin. "There's a difference." A flicker of something moved in his expression. Approval, or maybe pain. He stepped aside. "Come in, then." The study smelled of cedarwood, old leather, and something darker, earthier, like wild pine and smoke. The scent of an alpha with too much self-control. Aria stepped in without hesitation, though her heart beat traitorously fast beneath the robe she still wore. She'd only meant to come this far, to find the courage to face the man who had changed everything by doing nothing. Kieran Wolf had given her silence, a room, safety. He hadn't touched her. He hadn't demanded. He hadn't even asked why she was there. He just waited. The study was lit dimly, a fire low in the hearth, golden light painting shadows across towering bookshelves. The wall opposite the fire was floor-to-ceiling glass, revealing the frost-silvered forest beyond. A long oak desk sat at the center of the room, covered in scattered papers, thick folders, and a laptop left open but untouched. Kieran sat on the edge of a leather armchair, his drink resting in his palm, head tilted slightly toward her like he wasn't entirely sure what to do now that she was here. Aria looked around carefully before moving deeper into the room. Her fingers brushed over the back of the chair across from him, soft, worn, well-used. "Oh, this doesn't feel like a room for business," she said finally, her voice quiet. "Oh, it isn't," he replied. "This is the room I come to when I want to be alone." She blinked. "Then why'd you let me in? And I figured you might be the kind of person who understands silence better than anyone." A pause. That strange, heavy quiet between them. Aria moved to the chair and slowly sat, curling her legs beneath her, keeping the robe wrapped tight. But her spine straightened, not prey, not weak, just tired. Kieran drank again, then placed the glass on the table between them. His hands were large, calloused, but there was no violence in how he moved. Everything he did had weight behind it, intention, no wasted words, no wasted gestures. "And you've been here nearly a week," he said. "Not as a reprimand, just fact. And you haven't asked a single question." Aria met his gaze. "And I didn't think I was allowed to. Not in a cage anymore, Aria." Her name in his mouth sent a shiver through her, not from fear, from the unexpected intimacy of it. He said it like it mattered, like it wasn't something auctioned away by a greedy alpha who couldn't stand being mated to someone imperfect. She swallowed. "And why did you buy me?" Kieran didn't look away. "Because they would have broken you." Her breath hitched. "But no, already did," she whispered. "No," he said simply. "Not all the way, not yet." His eyes bore into her, sharp, wolf-bright, unreadable. "And I saw it, even on that stage. Even when you were half-starved and caged in that ridiculous excuse for silk. You didn't lower your eyes like the others. You didn't flinch. You just waited. You were angry. You were still fighting." Aria didn't realize she was trembling until her hands balled into fists in her lap. "And you don't know what they did to me," she said, more bitter than she intended. "And I don't need to. I've seen enough of what they do to Omegas who get rejected. I've seen worse than you, Aria." He paused, voice quieter now. "And I've seen some who never came back from it." She looked away. The fire cracked behind them. The sound of it grounded her. "And you said you didn't want me for mating," she murmured. But that's what I was sold for." "I don't want a mate," Kieran said, voice low but certain. "Son, I don't trust fate. I don't trust what nature chooses. But I don't believe you deserve what happened to you either. And I've got enough money and territory to piss off the Pax who tried to sell you." Aria's lips parted slightly. "So, what am I to you?" Kieran leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, face closer now. The heat of the fire caught the edges of his jaw. His scent sharpened just slightly, an unconscious reaction. "You're someone I'm giving a second life to. Whether you want it or not is up to you. You can stay, eat, rest, leave when you're ready, or don't. But you'll never owe me anything for it, ever." Tears stung her eyes, sudden and sharp. She hadn't cried in months. She thought the auction had taken even that from her. But here, now, in a room that wasn't meant for anyone else, she felt it. Safety. She wiped at her cheek before the tear could fall. "Why do I believe you?" she asked. Kieran's mouth curved, just slightly. The first real expression she'd seen on him. "Because I don't care whether you do or not," he said. "And that's how you know I'm telling the truth." The conversation slowed after that. He didn't push, she didn't run. They spoke for over an hour, mostly about nothing. Weather, the books she found in the South Wing library, how she liked her tea. And for the first time, Kieran laughed. Not loudly, not fully, but enough that she saw what his face looked like without the weight he carried. The lines near his eyes softened, his shoulders relaxed. He looked younger for a moment, more human. It disarmed her more than any charm could have. "Oh, you should sleep," he said, finally rising from his chair. "And you're still recovering. You'll need your strength." "Tink for what?" she asked softly. Kieran looked down at her, quiet, unreadable again. "For whatever you choose next." And then he left the study, leaving her alone with the firelight and the scent of his cologne still lingering in the air. That night, Aria didn't dream about her rejection. Not about the alpha who cast her aside with disgust. Not about the cold cell she'd spent weeks in before being auctioned like property. She dreamed of frost-covered trees, a warm fire, the weight of a steady gaze across a table, and the smell of cedar and smoke. A stranger who hadn't touched her, but who made her feel seen. The frost hadn't melted by noon. It clung to every branch like lace, delicate and sharp. The grounds of Wolf Manor stretched wider than Aria had imagined, past the gardens and the eastern courtyard, past the snow-dusted stone walls. There was a forest. Wild, untouched. Not like the fenced-in forests she'd grown up near. Training grounds for warriors, mating trails for alphas and their chosen omegas. This one was raw, beautiful, and completely still. The kind of stillness that made her wolf stir beneath her skin for the first time in months. Aria hesitated just beyond the back terrace, boots crunching softly in the snow, robe exchanged for one of the thick coats she'd found in a guest closet, plush and lined in soft fur, probably worth more than anything she'd ever owned before. She didn't care. She just needed air, space, a moment where her body didn't feel like a cage. She hadn't shifted since the rejection. Couldn't. Something inside her had locked up. Every time she got close to it, close to letting the wolf run, her mind would snap back to that moment, his voice, disgust curling from his lips. "You're defective. And no alpha would ever want this." Injected. Rejected. The collar had come next. Then the auction. Aria clenched her hands, nails biting into her palms through gloves. She wasn't there anymore. Kieran had told her she wasn't in a cage, so why did every step feel like a test? She moved toward the edge of the tree line. Her breath steamed in the crisp air. Snowflakes caught in her hair. A path, faint and barely visible, cut through the trees. A wolf trail. Her wolf, silent for so long, pushed against her bones. Freedom. She didn't know how long she stood there. Maybe minutes. Maybe an hour. But her body was vibrating with tension, like a violin string wound too tight. Then, soft footsteps behind her, her muscles locked. The old instinct kicked in, submissive posture, lower gaze, defense. But then the scent hit her. Not like the others. Not like him. Kieran's scent was different in the open air. Less clean-cut, raw, pine and snow and something dark beneath, like ash and memory. "And so I figured I'd find you out here," he said from behind her. No anger, no command. Just observation. Aria didn't turn, and I didn't know if I was allowed. He stepped beside her, hands in the pockets of his long black coat, his hair tousled by the wind. "You're allowed anywhere you want to be." Aria let out a breath. "Even outside the property?" His jaw ticked. A beat passed before he answered. "Oh, you can go anywhere. But I'd feel better if you didn't go past the tree line without me." "Why?" "In Durbans there are other wolves who don't ask before they take." She stilled, slowly turned to him. "And you're not like them?" Kieran's eyes met hers, level. "Not anymore." Aria studied him. There was a tension in him, too, one he carried like armor. Not the kind you showed off in fights, but the kind you wore when you'd survived too many. "Were you rejected?" she asked, quietly. The question hung in the air like a challenge, but he didn't flinch. "No," he said after a long pause. "But I rejected someone once." Her breath caught, not from surprise, but from the honesty of it. "What happened to her?" she asked. "Same was the daughter of a high-ranking alpha," he said, voice even. "And I arranged the bond. I was young, stupid, thought I'd be able to stomach it." He looked out toward the forest, jaw tightening. And Ty couldn't. "And did she suffer?" Aria asked, softer now. He looked back at her. There was something raw in his gaze. "Not like you, but yes." Aria nodded slowly. For once she didn't feel like prey, just human. "She's mated now," he added. "'Tis pups. A pack of her own. I made sure of it." "And guilt?" "To responsibility," he said simply. The wind shifted. Her scent must have changed. Something in her emotions slipping out. Kieran's nostrils flared briefly, but he didn't move closer, didn't invade her space. "It can't shift," Aria whispered suddenly, "not since..." She couldn't finish the sentence. The weight of it sat on her chest like a stone. "Oh no," he said. She blinked at him. I can feel it," he explained. "It's like a part of you's been locked up tight, like your wolf is waiting for you to give her permission." "And how do I do that?" she asked, her voice breaking just slightly. And you stop punishing yourself, he said. He said, for someone else's shame. The words struck her like lightning. She turned away, blinking furiously at the stinging behind her eyes. He didn't touch her, didn't offer her his jacket or pull her into an embrace. He just stood there, beside her. And it was enough. Come on, he said finally gently. There's a path that leads to the creek. It's frozen this time of year. Beautiful, quiet. She hesitated, then nodded. They walked together, not as Alpha and Omega, not as owner and purchase. Just two wolves, broken in different places. The creek was a sliver of silver beneath the canopy. Ice crusted its surface, and snow dusted the banks. Trees leaned low over it, like guardians of the silence. Aria sat on a fallen log, breath puffing in front of her, fingers trembling with something she couldn't name. Kieran crouched beside the creek, poking at the ice with a stick, like a boy instead of a billionaire. And I used to come here when I needed to think, he said. Back when my pack was still whole. What happened? He didn't look at her. I tried to lead wolves who didn't want a leader, only a ruler, and I refused to be a tyrant. Aria frowned. So they left? And they tried to kill me. She stared at him. He shrugged, like it wasn't worth much sympathy. Politics. Betrayal. You know the story. Her heart ached in a strange way. She didn't know the whole story. But she knew enough. Being unwanted came in many forms. She looked down at her gloved hands. And my pack threw me out like I was garbage. Kieran looked at her now, really looked. They were wrong, he said. The quiet returned. Not awkward, not tense, safe. They returned to the manor just as snow began to fall again. Aria's cheeks were flushed from the cold. Her shoulders for once didn't feel like they were carrying the weight of her past. Her wolf wasn't awake yet, but she wasn't asleep anymore either. She paused in the foyer as Kieran shrugged off his coat. Thank you, she said. He looked at her. Not as a man expecting gratitude, but like someone who understood how hard it was for her to give it. So you don't owe me anything, Aria. And no, she said softly, but I want to say it anyway. He nodded once, and in the space between them, something shifted. Not fate, not a bond, just trust, the fragile beginning of it. The next morning, Aria woke before sunrise. She didn't mean to. Her sleep had been deeper than usual, but her body was still trained to expect the sound of a cell door slamming or a hand dragging her out of bed. But none came, just silence. For a moment she lay still, soaking in the faint sounds of Wolf Manor, the hum of quiet radiators, the whisper of snow brushing the windows, the low creak of the old house stretching its bones. She turned her head slightly. Her window was slightly ajar. Cold air leaked in, but it smelled like pine in winter, not mold and fear. She inhaled, deep, steady. It wasn't her old pack cell anymore. It wasn't the dark auction chamber. It wasn't his voice telling her she wasn't enough. This was Kieran Wolf's home. She sat up slowly, surprised at how different her body felt. Not fixed, but lighter, like the heavy metal collar around her spirit had loosened a notch. Aria walked barefoot toward the window. The snow outside was still untouched. The path she and Kieran had taken to the creek yesterday was hidden again, like it had never happened. But she knew it had. Not just because of the memory, but because of the way something had stirred in her wolf while they walked together. Trust, or maybe the beginning of it. She turned and went to the wardrobe. No one had brought it up, but someone, likely Kieran or his staff, had filled it with clothing. Soft sweaters, wool coats, comfortable boots, all in neutral tones, gentle on the eyes. She ran her fingers across them, hesitating only briefly before picking a long navy cardigan and fitted black jeans. The clothes didn't scream Omega. They weren't trying to make her small or show off skin. They were just hers now. By the time she made her way down the grand staircase, following the scent of fresh coffee and firewood, the sun had barely crept over the mountains in the distance. Golden light filtered through the tall windows of the dining room, casting long shadows against polished wood floors. And there he was. Kieran Wolf stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled to his elbows, nursing a black coffee like it was the only thing tethering him to the earth. Aria slowed her steps, unsure. He glanced up, his eyes flicked over her, down her frame, then back up. Not with hunger, not with dominance, just a flash of something unreadable, something sharp and silent. "Morning," he said, nodding slightly. She took a breath. "Morning." He gestured to the long table. "I wasn't sure when you'd wake, so I told the chef to hold off. I can have something brought out if you're hungry." Aria blinked. "Chef? I don't need much," she said quickly. "Just maybe toast?" Kieran studied her, then set his mug down and pressed a button on the small intercom near the fireplace. "Emma, can we get some toast, scrambled eggs, and fruit in the dining room, please?" Aria sat near the middle of the table, far from the head, but not at the foot either. Kieran sat back down across from her, arms folded. He wasn't dressed for business today. No tailored suit, no tie. Just a black Henley shirt stretched across broad shoulders, and dark jeans. A silver cuff gleamed faintly on his wrist. The silence stretched. Aria tapped her fingers lightly against her thigh, a nervous habit. "Oh, you don't have meetings today?" And I cleared my calendar. She blinked. "And because of me?" He didn't look away. Yes, that simple. Direct. It disarmed her more than flattery would have. "Why?" she asked softly. Kieran leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. "Because you're not ready to be left alone in this house all day. Not yet." Aria's breath hitched. She should have argued. Should have told him she wasn't weak, didn't need a handler. But the truth was, he wasn't wrong. Being in the woods yesterday had cracked something open, and now she felt like a jar with the lid half off, exposed, trembling. The doors to the dining room opened, and a tall woman with graying hair swept in carrying 2 silver trays. Her eyes lit up when she saw Aria. "Good morning, Miss Aria," she said warmly, setting the tray in front of her with practiced elegance. "I'm Emma, head of staff here. If you need anything, and I mean anything, I'm your girl." Aria tried to smile. "Thank you." She had the kind of motherly presence that made Aria's chest ache, like something she'd never had and always needed. And Mr. Wolf," Emma said with a smirk, "you're having breakfast today? I thought hell would freeze over first." He gave her a dry look. Careful, Em. You'll lose your end-of-year bonus." Emma chuckled and bowed theatrically, then swept back out. Aria looked down at the plate, toast, fresh berries, and fluffy scrambled eggs. She hadn't eaten this well in years. "Why are you really being so kind to me?" she asked after a long silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "Own't you bought me, at the auction. You don't even know me." Kieran looked at her for a long time, then leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. "And I didn't buy you to use you, or own you. I bought you so they couldn't." Aria swallowed. "Why me? Then because when I looked at you, I saw something I'd seen in the mirror once." Her throat tightened. "What did you see?" A wolf with no pack, and too much pain in her eyes. She looked away. The food blurred. She blinked rapidly. "I don't want to be a victim forever," she said, her voice breaking. "And don't be." She looked back at him, startled. He didn't say it cruelly, or like it was easy. He said it like he knew exactly how hard it was, but also like he believed she could. That look, his quiet, infuriating, unflinching belief in her, cut deeper than anything else. She picked up her fork with a trembling hand, ate slowly, quietly, and for the first time in a long time, didn't feel like someone was watching her with judgment or lust or dominance, just watching to make sure she was okay. Later that day, Aria found herself in the Grand Library. Not because Kieran had led her there, but because she was curious. The manor was massive, filled with rooms she hadn't dared explore. But now she wanted to know what kind of man had a room filled wall to wall with books and no screens. The fireplace crackled warmly in the corner. A chessboard sat untouched, and in the far end of the room, tucked between a bay window and a wall of books, was Kieran Wolf, reading. His long legs stretched out, ankle crossed over his knee, a book in one hand and a glass of scotch in the other. He looked up when she entered. Didn't speak. Just waited. I didn't mean to interrupt," she said. "You didn't. Sen and I didn't know Alphas read." He arched a brow. "Dangerous stereotype. Sen I thought you were all about domination and spreadsheets." His lips twitched. "Only on weekdays." She smiled, just a little. But it was real. Kieran closed the book and set it aside. "And you're allowed to be curious, Aria. You can ask me anything, explore anything. This house is yours now too." "For how long?" His gaze sobered. "As long as you want it." She nodded, swallowed. "What if I want more than safety?" she whispered. His jaw flexed. Slowly, he rose from the chair, crossed the room until he stood just in front of her. "You'll never have to ask for what's already yours," he said, voice low and rough. Their eyes met, and something hot and slow and dangerous, coiled between them. He didn't kiss her, didn't touch her, but the air thickened with the possibility of it, and her wolf stirred. The days passed slowly, but not in the way Aria was used to. No harsh commands barked at dawn, no metallic clank of chains, no sharp silence that made her question whether she even existed anymore. Instead, Wolf Manor moved like a living, breathing entity, quiet, vast, and watchful. The staff didn't hover, but they were always nearby. The food kept coming. The warmth never faltered. And Kieran Wolf? He kept his promise. He never touched her, never crossed a line. But his presence was constant, in a way that made her feel seen without being suffocated. It terrified her, because it was becoming too easy to settle into a rhythm where breakfast was shared in that long, elegant dining room, where her scent was beginning to cling to his library couch, where the subtle brush of his gaze made her skin heat. She'd seen what happened to omegas who trusted alphas, and yet, here she was, letting her wolf breathe around one. Today, snow drifted softly outside the tall windows, blanketing the forest in thick, glittering white. The manor was quieter than usual. Emma had taken the day off to visit family. The rest of the staff was handling a holiday party Kieran had agreed to host at his company headquarters that evening. Aria was left alone in the house. She told herself it would be fine. She told herself she wasn't fragile anymore, but by midday the walls started pressing in. Not cruelly, not physically, but with memory. Memories that waited like ghosts in the corners of grand, empty rooms. She tried to distract herself, read a book, took a long bath, but eventually her steps took her, without thinking, to the one room she hadn't dared to enter since her arrival, his office. The heavy doors were open. Inside, the space was all masculine power and restrained chaos. Shelves of documents, framed photographs, one of Kieran shaking hands with a world leader, another of a young boy in uniform standing in front of a towering wolf. The scent of aged leather and cedar lingered like a promise, and on the desk, an open folder. She should have left. She knew better than to pry. But something pulled her forward. The folder held a dossier, one with photographs clipped inside, names, pack locations, notes written in quick, sharp strokes. Her eyes widened when she saw the title on the front, a Silver Hollow, Pack Reconstruction and Claim Report. Her old pack. Her breath caught. A lump rose in her throat as she scanned the first page. Wolf Enterprises had been secretly collecting evidence, witness testimonies, financial transactions, details of the illegal Omega trafficking ring that had been masked as auctions. And at the center of the first list of names was hers. Aria, sold, labeled feral, blacklisted by her own alpha, rejected, abandoned. Below it was another name, Kieran Wolf, private purchase, no further auctioning permitted. "Ain't Aria?" She froze. The deep, low voice came from the doorway. Kieran stood there, expression unreadable, but his eyes, they burned with something fierce and quiet. Aria straightened slowly. "And I didn't mean to. And I know." She held his gaze. "And you're investigating them?" "Yes." "For how long?" "And since the moment I learned what Silver Hollow was doing to their Omegas." She stepped closer to the desk. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed to know if you wanted justice or escape. There's a difference." Her jaw clenched. "And what if I want both?" A faint smile ghosted his lips. "Well, then you're stronger than most." She looked back at the file. Her throat worked around a thick knot. "When I said no one would believe me, that I was nothing that once rejected, I was just broken merchandise. So you were never merchandise." He crossed the room slowly, stopping in front of her. She could feel his heat, his scent, that steady, restrained power that rolled off him like smoke. "And you were betrayed, beaten, sold like cattle, and you still held your head high." His voice dropped. "And you were never weak, Aria. They were just too afraid of a strong Omega." Her eyes burned. She turned away, fighting the tears, but he gently caught her wrist. Not hard, not possessive, just anchoring. Aria exhaled. "I don't want to be afraid of you." He didn't move closer, didn't pull her in. "And I'll wait as long as it takes." Her breath hitched. "And if I never let you in?" she asked quietly. "And I'll still make sure no one ever touches you again." And silence settled between them. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was electric, full of tension, full of choice. She looked up into his eyes. "Why me, Kieran? You have wealth, power, options. You could have chosen any Omega." His voice was rough when he answered. "And because when I saw you in that cage, looking like you were ready to burn the whole world down just to breathe again, I didn't see a victim. I saw a warrior." Her heart thudded in her chest. She took a step closer. The space between them thinned. His gaze dropped to her lips. Then, slowly, achingly slowly, he stepped back. "And so I won't take you like this," he said, voice barely above a growl. "Well, not while you're still learning to stand on your own. But don't mistake that for lack of want." Aria's breath trembled. Because she wanted not just his body, but his belief in her. The way he looked at her like she could build an empire from ashes. The way he didn't see her as broken, but becoming. That night, Kieran left for his corporate party. He didn't ask her to join, didn't expect her to follow. But before he left, he paused in the doorway of her room, one hand resting against the frame. "If you need me, for any reason," he said, "just call. And if you change your mind and want to set the world on fire." She smiled faintly. "You'll bring the matches?" He smirked. "No, I'll bring the gasoline." The storm rolled in like a living beast. By midnight, the wind howled through the trees like ancient wolves baying into the darkness, and thunder cracked with a violence that shook the windows of Wolf Manor. Rain pelted the rooftops, slicing down in sheets so thick the forest beyond the estate vanished behind a silver-gray curtain. Aria stood at the tall window in her room, wrapped in a thick sweater, barefoot on the cold stone floor. Her reflection in the glass looked older than she remembered, more haunted, but also harder, tougher, not unscarred, but healing, piece by piece. The conversation with Kieran echoed in her mind, replaying every word, every glance, every unspoken truth. "You were never merchandise. I'll wait as long as it takes." He saw her, truly saw her, and that was the most terrifying thing of all. She wasn't used to being seen, only weighed, assessed, and dismissed. Her former alpha, Donovan, had rejected her because he said she was too much, too willful, too fierce, too unwilling to submit. He'd looked at her like a threat wrapped in an Omega's scent. Kieran Wolf, on the other hand, looked at her like she was something sacred. That scared her more than Donovan ever had. A sudden knock jolted her out of her thoughts. She turned, heart thudding. Emma opened the door halfway and peeked inside. Her cheeks were flushed, curls frizzed slightly from the damp air. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Aria, but you have a visitor." Aria frowned. "And this hour?" Santai told her it wasn't appropriate, but she insisted. Said it was about Kieran. And she asked for you by name. A cold sliver of warning slid down Aria's spine. "What's her name?" Emma hesitated. "Serena." Aria didn't recognize it, but the name rolled off Emma's tongue like a blade, sharp, careful, dangerous. "Since she's in the sunroom," Emma added. "Would you like me to send her away?" Aria straightened. "No, I'll go." The sunroom was dimly lit, with only a few oil lamps casting golden halos over the pale cream furnishings. The storm outside sent shadows dancing across the windows. The scent of jasmine lingered, delicate and cloying, and seated with one long leg crossed over the other was a woman who looked like she belonged on the cover of a fashion magazine. Serena. Tall, poised, with rich bronze skin and a sleek black dress that clung to every curve, her lips were painted blood red, her nails sharp as claws, and her eyes, those golden hazel eyes, dripped with disdain as they skimmed over Aria's sweater and bare feet. "So you're the little feral," Serena said smoothly. "So I expected you to be more broken." Aria's pulse beat in her throat. "And you are?" Serena smiled, slow and poisonous. "Kieran's former fiancé." The words hit like a slap. She'd never once asked Kieran about past lovers, partly because she didn't want to know, partly because she wasn't sure she could bear the answer. But this woman oozed something old and intimate, like someone who had once touched power, and had not liked being told she couldn't keep it. "I came to give you some advice," Serena continued. "Oh, not because I care, but because I know exactly how this ends." Aria's jaw clenched. "To you?" "Tino, yes." Serena stood, heels clicking across the floor like threats. "She plays the brooding alpha well, strong, controlled, kind even in his way, but Kieran Wolf doesn't save anyone without a price, especially not Omegas who were discarded like trash." Aria's spine stiffened. "If you came to insult me, you can leave." "Tent, oh no, darling. I came to warn you." Serena's voice dipped into a low, lethal whisper. "And Kieran is a wolf, yes, but not a tame one. He bought you, he owns you, and eventually he'll want what he paid for." She leaned in, close enough for Aria to smell the expensive perfume clinging to her skin. "And when that day comes, don't fool yourself into thinking you're anything more than his latest pet." And Aria didn't move, didn't blink. Her wolf paced behind her ribs, snarling. "Oh, I think we're done here," she said coldly. Serena's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And you'll see, little Omega. He'll cage you too, just like the rest of them." Then she was gone, her scent lingering like rot. Kieran returned an hour later, soaked to the bone. He found Aria in the library, curled into one of the chairs with a fire roaring beside her. She didn't look up when he entered. Her shoulders were tense, her jaw tight. He could smell the fury in the air before he saw it in her face. "Serena was here," she said flatly. Kieran froze. "What?" "She came to threaten me. Told me you'd eventually demand what you paid for, that I'm just your pet." The words hit him like iron. "She had no right. Sinche was your fiancé. Sunday ended that years ago. She didn't take it well." Aria looked at him then, eyes shining with something that wasn't quite tears, but wasn't far. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. Kieran moved closer, wet coat dripping on the rug. "And because she's irrelevant to who I am now, to who I'm trying to be with you." She stood, meeting him head on. "And not yours, she said, voice low and trembling. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." He didn't flinch. "No. And I'm not weak either. So don't protect me from your world. If I'm going to stay here, I need to know what I'm up against." Kieran studied her, breath shallow. Then he nodded. "On tomorrow," he said, "you'll come to the city with me. To Wolf Enterprises. You'll see the boardroom. The wolves who work for me. The ones who think I made a mistake bringing you here. And Serena? She won't get close again." She nodded once, then turned back to the fire. Kieran stood there, drenched and burning. Because the storm wasn't just outside anymore. It was here, between them. And soon, it would break. The sleek black car cut through the morning mist like a blade. Aria sat in the back seat beside Kieran, watching the skyline of New York rise ahead of them like a concrete kingdom. The windows were tinted, but she could still see the gold-tipped towers of Wolf Enterprises gleaming in the distance. A modern cathedral of steel, glass, and secrets. Kieran hadn't spoken much since they'd left Wolf Manor, but his presence was thunderous in its silence. His energy sharp, protective, on edge. He wore a black three-piece suit today, immaculate, tailored to cut like armor. His cufflinks were solid platinum and shaped like wolves' heads. Power radiated from him like heat, yet his hand rested lightly on her thigh, a touch of grounding comfort that neither claimed her nor pushed her away. "And you don't have to prove anything to them," he said as they approached the tower. "Just be yourself." She didn't look at him. "What if they hate who I am? Then that's their mistake." His fingers tightened. "Not yours." The car slowed to a halt in the underground garage, and just like that, it was time. Wolf Enterprises wasn't a building. It was a kingdom. The moment Aria stepped into the lobby, she felt it. The hum of power, the tension thick in the air, the way conversations dipped just slightly when she passed. Omega? It clung to her like a second skin, no matter how deeply she'd tried to mask it with the expensive perfume Kieran had provided. The marble floors gleamed. The ceilings soared. Wolves in designer suits moved with purpose, power, and predatory grace. Every one of them turned to look at her. Most of the men were alphas, all strong, polished, beautiful in that cold, dangerous way. Some omegas and betas floated through the hall as well, sharp-eyed and well-trained. But none of them looked like her. None of them had come here by being bought. As they reached the golden elevators, a tall, willowy blonde stepped forward to intercept them. "Kieran," she said smoothly, ignoring Aria completely. "So board's early. They've requested a private audience before the full meeting begins." He narrowed his eyes slightly. That wasn't part of the schedule. Her gaze flicked, finally, to Aria. It wasn't curiosity. It was veiled disdain, and they seemed to be concerned. "About your new companion." Aria spoke before Kieran could answer. "Would it help if I wore a collar?" The blonde's face went pale. Kieran exhaled a sound that might have been a laugh, or a warning. "Say she stays with me," he said. "And try again, Erica." Erica, his executive assistant from what Aria could gather, flushed, nodded stiffly, and retreated. The elevator opened. Inside, the silence stretched like a wire. "Oh, I liked your question," Kieran murmured finally, once the doors closed. "Oh, you're sharper than they are." Aria didn't smile. "Inside didn't come here to play nice. Want you to..." The boardroom was a monster of a space. Long black marble table, massive windows overlooking the skyline, and a line of men and women who looked like they could smell blood in the water. There were 12 of them, each with titles like Regional Alpha, Global Director, Pack Liaison. They were the power behind Wolf Enterprises. Elders, politicians, economists, lawyers, generals, predators. And Aria had just walked into their den. And he, "Veil," said a gray-haired man near the head of the table, steepling his fingers. "And I'm glad you could join us." She felt Kieran tense beside her. So they had dug into her past. "Amma wasn't aware this was an interrogation," she replied coolly. "Consider it." "Due diligence," said another. Alpha Jarek, his name tag read. "And you're staying under our Alpha's roof. We have a right to know who we're feeding." Aria stepped forward before Kieran could answer for her. Her voice was low and sharp. "You mean the right to decide if I'm worth the oxygen?" And a ripple moved through the table. The woman at the far end, Beta Lydia with sharp dark eyes, smirked. "She's got teeth. I'll give her that." "So you all sit here," Aria continued, "in your expensive suits, deciding what wolves like me are allowed to be. But you didn't reject me. You didn't buy me. You didn't rescue me either." She looked straight at Jarek. "And I didn't ask for your permission then. I don't need it now." Jarek leaned back, unimpressed. "And is this the part where we're supposed to clap?" Kieran stepped forward now. "This is the part where you remember she's my guest, and I don't need a vote to bring someone into my house." Lydia raised an eyebrow. "Into your house or into your bed?" Silence. Kieran's voice was like ice. "That's none of your business. And if anyone speaks to her like that again, they'll answer to me." His dominance swept through the room like a storm. Even Aria felt the ripple in her bones. The weight of it, the darkness coiled beneath his control. The wolves went silent. The point had been made. Later, in his top-floor office, Aria stood at the glass wall, looking down at the endless city below. "Sue didn't have to defend me," she said quietly. Yes," Kieran said, loosening his tie, "and I did." She turned. "Why?" "Because I know what it feels like to be treated like a threat just for existing." She studied him for a long moment. "Sometimes thought you were one of them." Sydney was. His voice was raw. "And sometimes I still am. But I'm trying to unlearn the things that taught me to treat people like currency." She crossed to him slowly, every step electric. Her hand brushed his chest, light, tentative. "And me?" she asked. "What am I?" Kieran's eyes darkened. He reached up, fingers tangling in her hair, tugging her face just a little closer, but not closing the distance. He was trembling. "All right now?" he whispered. "And you're the only thing that makes me feel like I'm still human." Their lips were close, breathless, almost there. But she pulled back, slowly. Not yet, because the burn was still building, and she wasn't ready to be claimed, not until she chose it. The next morning, Aria stood before a massive, curved mirror in the private dressing room adjoining her new office. Yes, her office. She still wasn't used to the word. It wasn't grand, not compared to Kieran's top-floor domain, but it was spacious and high-ceilinged, filled with soft natural light from arched windows and furnished in pale oak and ivory, a glass desk, custom bookshelves, and a sitting area framed with soft cream cushions, all curated by Kieran's in-house design team. "And she'll be my special liaison to corporate affairs," he'd said last night, handing her a slim folder, and a mouthful of a title that basically means, "No one messes with you unless they want to mess with me." Aria had raised an eyebrow. "Is this another collar in disguise?" Kieran's eyes had been amused but honest. "No, it's armor." Now, as she stared at her reflection, the woman looking back was not the girl she used to be, not the broken Omega crawling out of the ashes of rejection. She wore high-waisted slate-gray trousers, a sleeveless silk blouse that matched her eyes, and soft nude heels. Her dark curls had been coaxed into a glossy twist at her nape, and her makeup was minimal, polished, elegant. There was no hint of subservience, no pleading softness. She looked like power forged under pressure, and as she walked into the lion's den of the executive floor, she felt the eyes on her again. But this time something was different. It wasn't pity, it wasn't lust, it was curiosity. Her first day began with chaos. Ms. Vale, the regional director from Madrid, just requested an unscheduled call with Kieran, and legal is stalling the expansion contract again. Also, you've got an internal HR compliance briefing in 20 minutes, and your inbox is already flooded with appointment requests. That was Maya, the beta assistant assigned to Aria from Kieran's own elite team, sharp-witted, kind-eyed, and alarmingly efficient. Aria blinked. "Oh, you know I have no actual experience doing any of this, right?" Maya gave her a quick grin. "That's why you have me." "And what does a liaison to corporate affairs actually do?" "Think of yourself as a bridge," Maya said. "Between Kieran and the rest of the executive world. Between his instincts and his empire." "Hunt his instincts?" "And he's a wolf," Maya said simply. "And you make him less sharp around the edges. You're good for him, and people already see that." Aria didn't know how to respond to that. She didn't want to be known as anyone's calming influence. She wanted to be seen, on her own terms, for her own strengths. But maybe this was a start. The HR compliance meeting was held in a sterile conference room filled with alphas, betas, and a few high-ranking omegas who didn't so much as blink when Aria entered. But one did. He was tall, lean, handsome in a forgettable, polished way, like a man who had once been dangerous but had learned to file his teeth down to survive corporate life. His eyes met hers, and froze. Aria's breath caught. Maxon, her former packmate. He was here, at Wolf Enterprises. And he looked as shocked as she felt. Memories thundered behind her eyes. Maxon, standing at her side during the early days of her Omega presentation. Maxon, who had once called her his friend. Maxon, who had done nothing the night she was rejected in front of the entire pack. He'd stayed silent while she was dragged away, while her mate turned his back, while her family shunned her. Her hands trembled. He rose slowly from his chair, walking toward her. The others in the room faded, just background noise as her vision tunneled. "Aria," he murmured, I didn't know you were alive?" Her voice was sharper than she intended. "And or that I'd end up here, collared to a billionaire alpha?" His face crumpled. "I wanted to reach out after you were rejected. But there were rules." "Tja," she cut in, ice in every syllable. "Sue chose your place in the pack over your own spine. And, Aria, unsave it." Her tone turned low and lethal. "And not the scared girl you left behind. And if you think for 1 second I won't call you out in front of everyone in this building, try me." Maxon took a step back. "So I didn't mean harm. I just didn't know what to do." "Well," she said coolly, turning back to the room. "And try doing better." And with that, she sat at the head of the table. The room obeyed her like she was born to it. Later that night, Aria stood on the terrace of Wolf Enterprises, the skyline blazing before her in orange and gold. She felt a presence behind her, just before his arms wrapped loosely around her waist. "And Sue burned down that boardroom," Kieran murmured into her hair, "and didn't come to impress them. And Sue did anyway." She turned in his arms, face close to his, "and saw someone today, from my old pack." Kieran's body stiffened. Who? Emaxin. He didn't fight for me back then, I reminded him. And you want him gone? So no, I want him to watch me rise. Kieran smiled faintly. Oh God, you're dangerous. Seeing you like that. Sindel. Do. Their faces hovered close again. She could feel the tension thrum between them, the slow magnetic pull. She wanted to close the gap, she wanted his mouth on hers. But, not yet, she whispered, reading his mind. He didn't pull away, just rested his forehead to hers. I'll wait, he said. And in that moment, she almost believed that maybe she didn't need to run from him anymore. Not because he'd bought her, but because he saw her. And she was finally beginning to see herself. The sky over the city was gray and heavy, clouds curling like smoke above the towers of glass and steel. A storm was coming. Aria could feel it, not in the weather, but in the tension curling beneath the polished surface of Wolf Enterprises. 3 weeks had passed since she claimed her place in the company, and with each day she'd grown more comfortable in her power. She wasn't just a figurehead. Kieran had thrown her into the deep end, and she'd learned to swim, negotiating deals, managing executive communications, even diffusing 2 near disasters, one financial, the other reputational, had become part of her routine. But today, everything was off. The first sign was the encrypted file on her desk. It wasn't supposed to be there. Maya hadn't delivered it. It wasn't in her calendar, but there it was, tucked between meeting notes and financial reports. Its subject line as ominous as it was vague, urgent, Clause 9F, Valkyrie acquisition. She opened the file cautiously. Legal jargon filled the screen, rows and rows of contracts, timelines, and buried in the 6th page, a signature, Kieran Wolf. Aria frowned. She recognized the deal. The Valkyrie acquisition was Kieran's most high-profile expansion, a billion-dollar merger with a Scandinavian defense tech firm known for its cutting-edge biotech interfaces. It had made international news, the crown jewel of Wolf Enterprises. But something about the clause, it felt wrong. Her omega senses itched, warning her like a subtle pressure in the back of her skull. Clause 9F was a sub-agreement, an annex, buried under layers of non-disclosure, and it promised full rights of transfer of Valkyrie's proprietary biotech development, including experimental AI-driven tracking systems, to a private holding firm registered in Shadar Province, a location known for its mercenary-controlled black markets. It was a deal with shadows, and Kieran had signed it. Aria's breath caught. This wasn't just a bad business decision. This was a liability that could bring down the empire. By the time she reached Kieran's private office, the doors were already open, another sign something was off. The air inside was colder than usual, the lights dimmed, his silhouette sharp against the floor-to-ceiling windows. He was pacing. Aria didn't knock. And tell me Clause 9F isn't what it looks like. Kieran froze. Slowly he turned. Oh, we read it? So it was on my desk. His jaw clenched, his usually cool demeanor frayed at the edges. And it wasn't supposed to be. That clause is sealed. Only a handful of people in the world even know it exists. And now I do. She stepped forward, voice steady. Why, tell me it's not what it looks like. A long pause. Then Kieran exhaled and walked to the bar. He poured a dark amber liquor into a crystal glass, the silence thick as storm clouds gathering. And I made that deal 3 years ago, he said finally. And before I had a reason to play clean. Sold defense-grade tracking tech to a holding firm in a rogue province. Kieran, that's not just dirty, that's criminal. He didn't deny it. He drank. So I did what I had to do to protect what was mine, he said. Valkyrie was being hunted by larger syndicates. If I hadn't signed that clause, the entire company and the people inside it would have been gutted. And you trusted a black market firm over your own name? And I trusted leverage, he said bitterly. And you don't get to my level by playing saint, Aria. She stared at him, heart pounding. It was the first time she saw it, that fracture inside him. The part not forged by wealth or alpha dominance, but something darker, a ruthlessness born of necessity. He wasn't just the billionaire alpha who bought her freedom. He was a man who'd survived something brutal and decided never to be powerless again. I should report this, she whispered. I know. And Sai could take it to legal. Leak it. The press. Pin Hu could destroy me. Silence stretched between them. His voice softened. But you haven't walked away yet. And I haven't decided if I will. And their eyes locked. The air between them shifted, sharpened. Kieran stepped closer, slowly, as though approaching a wild thing that might flee. And I won't apologize for what I've done, he said quietly. But I'll never lie to you. And why? And because you're the only person I've ever met who sees through the skin of me, who doesn't flinch when she sees the monster underneath. She swallowed. And you're not a monster. Then you should ask around. She shook her head. I don't care what they say. I want to hear it from you. Another step closer. Now they were inches apart. If I tell you everything, he murmured, you won't be able to unknow it. You'll see all the things I've done, all the people I've stepped over, the blood on my hands, the deals I made when I thought no one would ever love me, so I stopped caring if I deserved to be loved. Aria's breath hitched. You think you don't deserve love? He didn't answer. And that silence said everything. She didn't walk away. Not that night. Instead, she sat with him for hours, as the storm rolled over the city, and he told her everything. About Clause 9F, about Valkyrie's real purpose, about the rival alphas who tried to bleed him dry, about the betrayal that forced his hand and turned him into something harder than steel. She listened. She didn't excuse him. But she didn't judge him either. And when she finally left his office, close to midnight, he walked her to her private elevator and stood silently beside her. The moment was quiet, heavy. You're not mine, he said, just as the doors opened, and know that. She turned to him, heart twisting. But I want to be, she said softly, someday. His eyes darkened. I'll wait, he said again. She stepped inside the elevator. This time she didn't look back. The storm passed, but the aftershock hadn't. Aria woke the next morning to a flood of encrypted emails from the legal division. At least 4 board members had somehow caught wind of Clause 9F overnight, though how, she couldn't say. It hadn't been her, and it certainly wasn't Kieran, which meant someone had been watching, waiting for a crack in the marble. Wolf Enterprises' gilded exterior was beginning to fracture. She slipped out of bed, her head pounding. Coffee didn't help. Neither did the shower. By the time she reached the 36th floor, the executive wing was already humming like a hornet's nest. The first person she saw was Mason, Kieran's VP of Global Operations. Tall, broad-shouldered, and smirking like he already knew she was in deep. Morning, sweetheart, he said, far too casually. And board meeting's been bumped up. Looks like we've got fireworks coming early this year. Why? She asked, walking past him. Because someone's trying to blow the place up from the inside, he muttered, low and sharp. And if I were you, I'd start watching my 6. The boardroom on the top floor was all glass and steel, intimidating in its minimalism, with a table long enough to seat 20 and not a single curtain to hide the view. Kieran wasn't there yet, but she was. Aria stepped inside and felt the change immediately, a new presence, power coiled like a cobra behind polished red lips and ice-blue eyes. Sasha Varel, Alpha, billionaire heiress, newly installed board member with a reputation for devouring weaker alphas in corporate mergers, and still smiling through the blood. She was sitting at the head of the table, in Kieran's chair. Well, Sasha said, without standing, and if it isn't the Omega Cinderella. Tell me, do you wear glass slippers to the office too, or just silk sheets in the CEO's penthouse? Aria didn't flinch. She sat in her assigned seat, placed, on paper, 2 positions down from the head, close enough to speak, not close enough to command. I wear steel heels, she said evenly, and it better to step on people who underestimate me. A few of the board members chuckled, one even nodded. Sasha didn't. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes narrowed. You've made quite the impression, Aria. Kieran's little rescue, formerly rejected by your mate, bought for a price that's now turning into a stake in his empire. You must be very persuasive. Pun funny. I heard the same thing about you, Aria said coolly. Except the word persuasive was replaced with poisonous. The air cracked. Sasha leaned forward. Careful, darling. The men in this room might be amused by your claws, but they won't save you when the wolves come to eat. "I'm not here to be saved," Aria said. "I'm here to win." Before Sasha could respond, the doors swung open, and Kieran Wolf walked in like a god descending from Olympus. He didn't look at Aria, not immediately. His gaze swept the room, calculating. His custom suit was darker than usual, almost midnight blue, and the subtle tension in his jaw told her he already knew. Someone leaked it. He took his seat, and without acknowledging Sasha, said simply, let's begin." The meeting was brutal. Sasha launched first. Clause 9F was brought up on the screens. She moved like a predator, quoting law and precedent, hinting at regulatory fallout. "Clause," she said, could expose Wolf Enterprises to international criminal liability. If the holding firm is tied to arms trafficking, Kieran Wolf could be indicted under Section 82C of the Global Trade Act. Gasps. Murmurs. Kieran didn't blink. Then the clause was signed under sovereign immunity, he said. When the firm in question was vetted through Valkyrie's own board, which, at the time, held full discretion. And it wasn't disclosed to this board, Sasha pushed. "And you now hold 70% of Valkyrie's post-merger shares. That makes it our problem." "And 'twas handled," Kieran said, voice flat. "And there are no loose ends." Sasha smiled, sweet, savage. "And what about the Omega sitting 2 seats from you? Did she know about this before the rest of us?" Eyes turned to Aria. Aria straightened. "And I saw it yesterday morning. I didn't leak it." "Of course not," Sasha said smoothly. "Sue wouldn't need to. The scandal alone ties you to the fallout, and if Kieran falls, so does your title, your stake, your protection." There it was, not an accusation, a threat, a test. Kieran said nothing. So Aria spoke. "And I didn't come to this company to be protected," she said, voice steady. "And I came to fix what others couldn't. If you're looking for blood, Sasha, you should know, I've already survived being gutted by the person who was supposed to love me most. Do you really think I'm afraid of you?" Silence. Even Sasha blinked. Aria went on. "Clause 9F is a risk, no one's denying that. But I've already begun drafting a shadow contingency to isolate the liability from our domestic interests. If you want to protect your shares, you'll back my plan." She turned to the board, unwavering. "Or we can keep pretending this company needs saving from the inside out, while we hand over control to someone who's been licking her lips for Kieran's throne since the day she bought her seat at this table." Kieran finally looked at her. His eyes weren't just approving. They were burning. When the meeting ended and the board filed out, Kieran stayed behind. So did Aria. The doors shut. Silence pulsed between them. "I told you not to get involved," he said at last. "And you made me vice president, Kieran," she said. "And you don't get to tell me to sit down and shut up anymore." A long beat. Then, softly, he smiled. "And I've created a monster. And oh, you gave one a reason to live." They stood there for a moment, both breathing hard, adrenaline still humming in their blood. "I don't want her near you," Kieran said suddenly. His tone had changed, gone darker, possessive. Sasha? Says she's dangerous. She doesn't just want power, she wants me. And she knows the fastest way to break me is through you." Aria stepped closer. "Then don't give her the chance." His gaze dropped to her lips. "I'm trying, and try harder." The glass elevator descended in slow silence, reflecting the shimmer of the city's skyline. Aria leaned against the mirrored wall, arms crossed tightly over her chest, trying to keep her hands from shaking. She hadn't lost her composure during the meeting, but now the adrenaline had worn off, and her body remembered that it wasn't steel, it was flesh, bone, nerve. Her phone buzzed in her palm. Encrypted message, unknown sender subject, Omega code minus do not trust him. Her pulse jolted. The sender ID was masked with a triple firewall wrote, whoever had sent it knew what they were doing. This wasn't a prank. She clicked on the attachment, a loading screen, then a single line of text across a black interface. And you were never just bought, you were marked, tagged. Asset number 0714. Ask him what the code means before you're erased. Aria's stomach dropped. She had to talk to Kieran. But not here, not now. The walls had ears. And Sasha wasn't the only enemy watching. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of strategy meetings, press control, and legal firefighting. The Clause 9F situation wasn't contained, but it was managed. Barely. Every move Aria made was watched, measured, but it wasn't Sasha's scrutiny that gnawed at her. It was Kieran's silence. He hadn't brought up the boardroom, or the fact she'd spoken over him, or the look they'd shared in the moments after. But something between them had shifted, and she couldn't tell if that shift meant he was getting closer, or building walls. When Aria finally returned to the penthouse on Friday night, her feet aching in her heels and her inbox screaming with flagged messages, she found him standing on the balcony. Back to her, sleeves rolled, shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest. He didn't turn around when she stepped into the room. "You're late," he said. "Hint you dad to finish the Valkyrie brief. And didn't answer your phone." Sinti Hai was busy. Silence stretched between them like a blade. He finally turned. His eyes were tired but sharp, like a beast that hadn't slept, not because it couldn't, but because it refused to lower its guard. "One need to be careful," he said, voice low, "when there's more going on than you know." "And then tell me," she said. A pause. He walked toward her slowly, stopping just inches away. His presence was a wall of heat. Tension crackled like static in the space between their skin. "And I've kept you protected by keeping you in the dark, Aria. That's how I survive. That's how I keep the people I care about safe." She looked up at him. "I don't get to say that and then lie to me." He flinched. And that was her confirmation. He'd been hiding something. "And you know what the Omega Code is, don't you?" she asked. His jaw clenched. "Where did you hear that?" "Fun you didn't answer the question." Kieran took a step back. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once before he turned to face her again. You weren't supposed to find out like this," he said. Finally. "An Omega Code isn't just a tracker, it's a protocol. A database of genetically classified Omegas with rare DNA markers. Traits that make them valuable." She went still. "What kind of traits?" He looked away. "And you're one of them," he said. 80714. "I found your name in the database 6 months ago. 6 months ago. Before he bought her." Her heart started to hammer. "So you didn't buy me to save me," she said, voice numb. "You bought me because I was an asset. Because I was part of your collection strategy." "Oh no," he said sharply. "And I bought you because I knew what they'd do to you if I didn't." "You don't understand what this code means, Aria. It's not just a label, it's a target. Someone's hunting the Omegas on that list. And you're next." The room swayed slightly. Aria took a shaky breath. "I need to see it," she said. "And the file, everything." He hesitated, but then nodded once. He walked to the secure cabinet in the wall, entered a biometric key. A safe slid open, revealing a glass tablet. When he handed it to her, it flickered to life, revealing a glowing emblem, Omega Code, Tier Black. Aria scrolled through the list. Code names, dates of origin, statuses captured, missing, deceased. Her name was listed under Utto 714 Aria Wren. Status, pending collection. Tier 1 marker present. "And what's a Tier 1 marker?" she asked. Kieran was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Inti means you're not just valuable. You're one of the last. A genetic descendant of a bloodline wiped out a generation ago. Your existence isn't just rare, it's lethal to the people who want to control the Omega gene pool." Her head spun. "You're saying they'll kill me to keep me off the market?" They'll auction you first," he said grimly. "And they'll erase you." Her hands trembled. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed time to figure out who was behind the registry leak," he said. "And now I know." She looked up. "Who?" Kieran's eyes turned to fire. "Sasha Varel." They stood in silence for a long time after that. The city lights flickered below them. The air was thick with danger, and something else, a tether between them, fraying from the weight of unspoken things. "I need you to trust me," Kieran said finally. "And want to," Aria said, barely a whisper. But I don't know where the act ends and the truth begins." Kieran took a step closer, then another. until he was in front of her, hands ghosting the line of her arms without touching. "And never meant to fall for you," he said, voice husky. "And just wanted to save you, keep you close, use you as a weapon if I had to. But somewhere between then and now, I stopped seeing you as an asset." She blinked. "Then what do you see me as now?" His eyes burned into hers. "You already know," he kissed her. Not hard, not possessive, but soft, gentle, painfully reverent, like he was asking for permission, offering a truth he hadn't dared say aloud until now. She kissed him back, just once, then pulled away. "'Tis changes nothing," she whispered. "I know." But neither of them moved, because it changed everything. The city's midnight hush pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows like a held breath. Rain trickled down the glass, streaking through the glow of distant traffic lights like veins of gold against shadow. Aria stood with her back to the storm, arms braced on the cold marble countertop of the penthouse kitchen. She could still feel Kieran's kiss on her lips, gentle, reverent, and devastating. He hadn't said another word after that. He'd just walked away, retreating into silence like a man afraid of crossing a line he couldn't uncross. But she didn't want silence anymore. Not with him. Not when the truth had finally cracked the surface. Not when she was done pretending she wasn't falling for him. She turned around slowly and found him standing in the doorway. Shirt gone, hair damp, chest rising and falling with the kind of restraint that made her thighs clench involuntarily. He looked at her like she was the storm now, and he was done running from it. "And you shouldn't be here," he said, voice raw. Her throat tightened. "And tell me to go." He didn't move, didn't speak, only stared, like she was something holy and forbidden all at once. And then he broke, crossed the space between them in 2 long strides and cupped her face in his palms. "Tell me this isn't a mistake," he murmured. "Oh, because once I start, Aria, I won't stop." She reached up slowly, placed her hand over his. Then it stopped being a mistake a long time ago. That was all it took. He crashed his mouth onto hers with the force of every pent-up feeling he'd ever swallowed. It wasn't gentle this time. It was needy, starved. The kiss dragged out of them every suppressed desire, every angry glance, every moment they'd ignored what their bodies had already known. His hands roamed her waist, her back, then lower, lifting her with ease onto the kitchen counter. She gasped against his lips as the cold marble met the back of her thighs. "Oh, you drive me insane," he growled against her mouth. "You challenge me, defy me, make me want things I shouldn't." Her fingers threaded through his hair, tugging just enough to make him groan. "And you make me feel like I'm not just some asset," she whispered. "Like I'm more." He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper. His lips traveled along her jaw, down her throat, sucking lightly at the spot where her pulse fluttered like wings. She shuddered, arching into him as his mouth found the sensitive spot just below her ear. "Aria," he breathed, "say stop if you don't want this." But she didn't, couldn't. Instead, she pulled his belt loose and pushed his slacks down his hips. Kieran groaned into her mouth as her hands explored the ridges of his abs, the hard line of his hips. He was heat and power and restraint barely holding on. In a sudden movement, he lifted her from the counter, carrying her effortlessly down the hall to his bedroom. She'd never been in it before, never crossed that last unspoken boundary between them. The room was shadowed, sleek, expensive. But the second they crossed the threshold, it felt like a different world. No boardrooms, no contracts, no omega codes, just them, just this. Kieran set her down gently on the edge of the bed, fingers trembling as he pushed her blazer off her shoulders. His touch slowed, reverent now. Undoing her buttons one by one, like she was a secret he'd waited years to read, he peeled the shirt from her frame, kissing the hollow between her breasts, the curve of her waist. "Oh, you're so beautiful," he murmured, voice rough with emotion. "I don't think I ever told you." "Said didn't have to," she said. "And you looked at me like I was." His hands paused at her hips, eyes locking with hers. She nodded once, and then the rest of her clothing fell away like silence before a storm. He worshipped every inch of her, his mouth, his hands, his body mapping hers with aching, deliberate slowness. When he finally entered her, it wasn't with urgency, but with a kind of desperation that felt like surrender. They moved together slowly at first, bodies tangled in heat and sweat, her moans whispered into his shoulder, his name gasped against her lips. "Daria," he whispered, thrust deep inside her. "Look at me." She did. And what she saw in his eyes wasn't just desire, it was everything. Possession, need. Something dangerously close to love. Their rhythm built, grinding deeper, harder, as tension coiled and snapped in waves of pleasure so sharp she saw stars. And when they finally came undone together, her fingers clawing down his back, his growl echoing in her ear, it was nothing short of shattering. Not just release, not just sex, something raw and life-altering. When it was over, he held her against his chest, breath ragged, his hand smoothing down her hair. Neither of them spoke, because there were no words for what had just happened, only silence. And the slow, heavy truth settling in her bones, they couldn't go back. Not now. Not ever. The dawn crept in like a thief. Soft golden light spilled across the silk sheets, crawling over the curves of Aria's bare back, her lashes fanning out against her cheeks as she slept. Kieran lay beside her, wide awake. He hadn't moved in hours, didn't want to, because if he did, it would become real. And real meant dangerous. Real meant everything he'd locked away, every instinct, every buried hunger, every violent edge that came with being an alpha, was now tangled in her scent, embedded in her skin, saturating his own body in a way that terrified him. He had marked her without marking her. There was no official bond, no ceremonial bite, no biological seal. But emotionally, he was hers. And worse, she was his. Aria stirred against his chest, lashes fluttering open as her cheek pressed against the tattoo on his heart, the one no one ever touched. Until her. "Hey," she whispered sleepily, voice hoarse from the night before. "Hey." Their eyes met, and for the first time in years, Kieran felt unguarded, stripped raw. She had seen every inch of him last night, not just his body, but the parts no one else had dared touch. The broken ones, the ones Sasha had mocked, weaponized. But Aria hadn't run, she'd held him tighter. And now? Now she looked at him like he was still worth something, even after everything. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, fingertips grazing the edge of his jaw. He caught her hand, kissing her palm. "Son, I should be asking you that." "And sign, I'm fine," she whispered. "And more than fine." But the flicker in her gaze gave her away. It was the same flicker he saw in his own. Uncertainty. Because nothing had changed between them, and yet everything had. There was no undoing it. No pretending this wasn't the point of no return. "I meant what I said last night," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "And you're more than what they made you." Aria blinked at him, then nodded. She didn't say "I love you." She didn't need to. Not yet. It was too fragile, too raw, like lace catching fire. They were still learning how not to be afraid of burning. But the warmth between them was real, and they both felt it. Until Kieran's phone buzzed, loud against the nightstand, a break in the moment, a rupture. Aria sighed and rolled onto her back, giving him space. He leaned over, grabbing the phone, and felt his blood turn to ice. 3 missed calls, 1 voicemail, all from Dominic, his lead enforcer. The subject line of the voicemail said one word: breach. Kieran sat up, muscles coiling. He played the message. Dominic's voice was sharp, low, urgent. "Oss, we've got a problem." There was a breach at Omega Registry HQ. Someone accessed the black column files. Aria's ID was flagged. Someone's been trying to backtrack her DNA chain, and that someone isn't us. Kieran's heart stopped. He stood immediately. "What is it?" Aria asked, eyes alert now. "What happened?" He turned to face her, the mask slipping back into place. "Someone's targeting you." She sat up, the sheet falling to her waist. "Targeting me how?" "In your registration file. It's been accessed. The kind of access only someone high level could pull off." Her eyes widened. "Oh, but why?" "I'm not bonded. I'm off-grid." "Exactly," he said, jaw clenched. "That's what makes you valuable. Whoever's looking into you, they're not just curious, they want something." Aria wrapped the sheet around her and stood. "Who would do that? Sasha?" Kieran's silence was answer enough. He walked to the closet, throwing on a black shirt and slacks with efficient movements. I'm locking down the penthouse. You stay here. No press, no contact, no wandering. Her voice sharpened. Oh, not a prisoner. No, he said, softer. You're mine, and I protect what's mine. Aria flinched. He realized his words were too close to what Blaine used to say, to what every possessive alpha said when they wanted control, but he didn't mean it like that. And she knew it, because her gaze softened again. I'll stay. But I want to help, she said. Don't freeze me out. Kieran reached for her hand, brought it to his lips. I couldn't even if I tried. He left the room a moment later, phone already to his ear. The war had begun, and this time it wasn't just business, this was personal. Because Aria wasn't just the woman he wanted. She was the only one who'd ever seen him clearly, and stayed. And now someone wanted to take her away. They'd have to go through him first, through blood, through fire, through every violent part of him he'd tried to bury. Meanwhile, across the city, Sasha Cross sat in the velvet-lined back seat of her limousine, sipping from a crystal flute of champagne. On her lap sat a tablet, a woman's file open across the screen. Name, Aria Monroe. Status, unbonded Omega. Blood match, rare. Unsuppressed. Ideal for alpha-tier genetic merging. Sasha smiled. Well, well, darling, she purred, tapping the screen. Now I see why Kieran's gone soft. She handed the tablet to the man beside her. Bring her to me, she said. And be quick about it. Aria had never felt more watched in her life. She stood in front of the tall, soundproofed windows of the penthouse's east wing, arms folded, gaze fixed on the skyline. The glass looked out over the city like an all-seeing eye, but she knew better. She wasn't looking out. She was being looked in on. Kieran had doubled the security. There were now biometric locks on every door, hidden surveillance feeds, encrypted alarms, a rotating team of guards at every exit. She couldn't take a breath without someone logging it. She understood why. She even appreciated it, in theory. But it didn't feel like protection anymore. It felt like a cage made of diamond and steel. She was safer, yes, but no freer than when Blaine controlled her schedule and silenced her opinions. The only difference? Kieran cared. And that made the confinement more painful, not less, because she wanted to fight alongside him, not be tucked away behind his fortress walls like a precious vase too delicate to touch the battlefield. The knock on the bedroom door made her pulse spike. Only one person knocked like that, like he didn't need permission, but asked for it anyway. She opened the door. Kieran stood on the other side, dressed in black slacks, black shirt rolled up at the sleeves. His forearms flexed where he held a small manila folder. His jaw was tight, eyes stormy. Got something for you, he said, voice low. He stepped inside, offering her the folder. She took it slowly, brows knitting as she pulled out the single sheet inside. Her breath caught. The page was an Alpha Registry ownership transfer form, and her name was on it. Aria Monroe, female. Unbonded Omega, marked under disputed possession, filed 3 days ago, signed by Sasha Cross. Aria's heart dropped into her stomach. Say she's trying to buy me? She whispered. Kieran's jaw ticked. She's not trying. She claimed she inherited ownership through Blaine's estate, and that your protections expired the moment you were removed from bonded status. Say never was bonded to Blaine. And that doesn't matter. Legally, the registry accepted the preliminary filing. She's making a play for full rights. Own-tier rights? Aria repeated, her voice cracking. And not a front king asset. Oh no, he said, and that to people like her, Omegas without bonds are loopholes waiting to be claimed. Aria felt sick. She dropped the paper and backed toward the window. Everything she'd fought for, all the progress she thought she'd made, was still paper thin. One legal document, one corrupt signature, and she could be dragged back into a life she'd barely escaped. Kieran crossed the room and cupped her face in his hands. Oh, look at me. She did. And fighting this, he said. Insane already have lawyers drafting a legal counterclaim. I've contacted the registry board. I'm invoking a protection clause, one reserved for high-risk Omega threats. And a threat now? She choked. Only to people who underestimate you. Her laugh cracked out. Dry. Bitter. So I'm being saved by a billionaire alpha filing more King paperwork. No, Kieran said. In your being protected by a man who loves you. Aria froze. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. You love me? He didn't flinch. I knew the night you stood in my office and told me no one would ever own you again. I just didn't let myself admit it. And now? And now I'd raise every law in the city if it meant keeping you safe. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. Because love wasn't enough, not if she didn't claim her place in this war too. Oh, you can't do this alone, she whispered. And I want to be a queen who hides behind her king. You're not, he said, and you're a sword. Her throat tightened, and then, softly, she stepped forward and pressed her forehead to his chest. And I want to fight. Teach me how. Kieran kissed the top of her head, then he handed her a second folder. What is it? She asked. Everything you need to destroy her. Later that evening, the penthouse war room hummed with quiet energy. Screens lit up with maps, code streams, news tickers. Dominic sat near the door, tapping furiously on a tablet. Across from him, Aria stood beside Kieran in sleek black, hair tied back, eyes sharp. Her aura had changed. No longer a survivor, now a soldier. Kieran handed her a drive. What's this? Every illegal transaction Sasha's made in the past 5 years. From genetic trafficking to Omega identity suppression. Ties to black market alpha suppressants? Connections to 2 missing bonded females. Aria blinked. How did you get this? And I've been building it for years. And why haven't you used it? He looked at her, insane. I was waiting for the right reason. Their gazes locked. You're the reason. She slid the drive into her pocket. What's the plan? Tomorrow night, there's a registry gala. Sasha will be there. She's receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award in Genetics Tech Advancement. How poetic. And you'll be attending as my date. Am I allowed to be this flammable? He smirked. Darling, I'm counting on it. The registry gala was an annual spectacle of obscene wealth, designer pheromones, and political blood sport, all disguised under the sheen of tuxedos, glittering dresses, and synthetic champagne that cost more than most Omegas made in a year. Held in the historic Solace Atrium, the glass dome ballroom glowed like a star beneath the night sky. Gold-trimmed walls shimmered with illusion runes to reflect the most flattering light. Every corner was watched by private security dressed as staff, every name on the guest list vetted by both money and lineage. It was the one place an unbonded Omega should never set foot, which made Aria Monroe's entrance all the more powerful. She didn't just walk in. She arrived, wearing black, not a gown of delicate silk or sequins like the other high-born Omega wives. No, Aria wore a sculpted midnight black pantsuit tailored like armor. The fabric was matte and smooth like sin, open at the collar to reveal the curve of her throat, the hint of her unbonded status like a silent challenge. Her heels were sharp, her walk sharper, and her hand? Tucked possessively into the crook of Kieran Blackthorn's arm. He wore a suit so dark it drank light, with his alpha presence turned up just enough to make weaker wolves step aside as they passed. Together, they didn't look like a couple. They looked like a reckoning. The moment they stepped onto the gala floor, the hum of polite conversation dimmed. Heads turned, eyes widened. Whispers sparked like dry leaves. Is that Teed unbonded Omega? Didn't she belong to Blaine? Why is she here with him? She shouldn't even be... A waiter flinched as Aria passed too close. She heard it all. Felt it. But she didn't flinch, didn't shrink. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't trying to disappear, she was trying to be seen. Aria, Kieran murmured beside her, voice low. Are you ready? She glanced up at him, then down at the small drive hidden beneath the folds of her sleeve, and nodded, as I'll ever be. 30 minutes later, the gala was in full swing. Drinks flowed, laughter was forced, deals were whispered under the cover of string quartets and expensive cologne, and at the head of it all stood Sasha Cross. Resplendent in crimson, her gown clung to her like a second skin, and her smile, polished and perfect, could cut glass. She stood at the podium now, accepting her award from the registry's director. A thin alpha with breath that reeked of aged power and old money. When we honor Sasha Cross tonight, the director said, for her groundbreaking contributions to genetic compatibility studies and the Omega Wellness Initiative. Her work has shaped a better, safer future for the next generation of bonded pairs. Aria's hand flexed. Better? Safer? She stepped forward. Kieran's fingers brushed her wrist. One last silent check, she nodded, then broke away from his side and walked up the steps to the podium. Gasps erupted. The director stuttered, eyes wide. "Excuse me, young lady, this is not..." Sasha's smile cracked, the first fissure marring her porcelain mask. But Aria didn't stop. She reached the microphone and looked out over the glittering sea of faces. Then she pressed a small button on the drive in her sleeve. The ballroom screens, normally projecting meaningless graphs and the registry logo, flickered. Then changed. Images appeared, PDF files, emails, video clips, documents showing illegal Omega detainment, forged bond claims, genetic black market sales tied to Sasha Cross's accounts. Aria's voice, clear and steady, filled the room. "My name is Aria Monroe, unbonded Omega. Former ward of Blaine Cross, tonight I come not as a victim, but as a witness and a warning." She paused, locking eyes with the director. "This woman you've honored tonight? She trafficked Omegas under the guise of research. She fabricated compatibility reports to sell high-demand bloodlines to alpha families. And she attempted to claim me as property after my abuser's death." Murmurs turned to outrage, to confusion, to fear. Sasha stepped forward, eyes blazing. "She's lying. She's unstable. She's an unbonded Omega with a trauma history." Aria didn't even blink. Instead, she pulled up the final file, a recorded phone call. Sasha's voice, "Just retrieve the girl. Use the suppressants if you have to. I don't care if she fights. She's an asset. If I can't have her legally, I'll take her the old-fashioned way." Gasps rang out. The director's face turned gray. Registry officials pulled Sasha back from the microphone, her protests growing shrill and panicked. And Aria? She stood taller than she ever had before. No more fear, no more cages, no more being anyone's anything. Outside, later that night, Kieran stood with her beneath the white marble archways of the Solace atrium. The cool night air curled around them, but Aria didn't feel the cold. Not with his arm around her waist. "And you did it," he whispered against her temple. "And you were magnificent." Senai was terrified, she admitted. "Still am." He pulled back to look at her. "And you did it anyway. That's what makes you powerful." She looked up at him, really looked, and saw the alpha, not just the billionaire, but the man who had walked through hell beside her. "Ain't I want this," she whispered. "What? You us?" Kieran froze, then stepped closer. "So do I." Their kiss was soft this time. No fire, no hunger, just warmth, trust, the beginning of something not born in desperation, but choice. The aftermath came like the tide, slow at first, and then overwhelming. Sasha Cross was taken into custody within the hour of the registry gala's explosive climax. Media channels exploded with coverage. News anchors tripped over their own words, some condemning, others stunned. As Aria's story went viral overnight, she was everywhere. The unbonded Omega who exposed a billion-dollar corruption scandal. The girl who brought down a pillar of the alpha elite. But Aria? She wanted none of the fame, just her peace. 3 weeks later, the penthouse felt different now. Not because of the furniture. It was still sleek, luxurious, masculine in that distinct Kieran Blackthorn way. But because of her. The quiet was no longer sharp, but soft. She didn't wake up fearing the sound of footsteps. She didn't flinch when the door clicked shut behind him. She didn't feel like a possession. She felt like a person, a woman, and, God help her, a woman in love. She hadn't said it yet, neither had he, but it lived in the space between them. In the way he brought her tea in the morning and never tried to touch her unless she reached first. In the way she started leaving her sketchpad on the table where he could see it. In the way he always stopped to look. Not because he wanted to use her, because he wanted to know her. They hadn't talked about bonds. Not since the gala. Not since the moment everything changed. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like a beginning. Kieran stood at the edge of the rooftop garden, city lights stretching out behind him like 1,000 glittering constellations. He wore no tie, his jacket was off. The top of his shirt undone. He looked almost approachable, except he still radiated alpha, contained, powerful, intense. He turned when she stepped out, and his gaze dropped. Aria wore nothing elaborate, just one of his shirts, white, crisp, oversized enough to skim the tops of her thighs. She was barefoot and stunning. "You'll catch a cold," he murmured. "And I'll survive," she replied, walking to him. He didn't move until she stopped in front of him. Didn't touch her, didn't speak, just waited. So she reached up and placed his hand on her waist herself. And then he pulled her close, not like a man staking a claim, but like a man who'd waited forever to hold something precious. "So I thought about leaving," she whispered. His arms tightened. "No. But I didn't." "Sen I know." She looked up at him. "And I stayed because I wanted to." His throat worked silently. "And Aria." She took a breath, let it out. "And I want you, not because you saved me, not because I owe you anything, but because, when I look at you, I don't see power or wealth. I see someone who saw me when I was at my lowest and never asked for anything in return." He cupped her face gently, reverently. "And I only ever wanted your choice, he whispered, "even if that meant losing you." Tears welled in her eyes. "And now I want to give it to you." Her lips trembled. "Oh, bond me." His breath caught. "What?" "Sent I want to be yours, because I choose you." His hands shook when they slid around her. "Aria, once I mark you, there's no going back. You'll feel everything I feel, every time I need you, every time I ache." "Sentang already do," she whispered, "and even without the bond." He kissed her then, not with fire, but with promise. And when he carried her to the bed, it wasn't rushed, it was reverent. He undressed her slowly. Every button he opened, every piece of skin he revealed, was touched like it was sacred. He laid her down like a prayer and kissed her like a vow. And when he finally slid inside her, it wasn't possession. It was homecoming. Her breath caught on a gasp, and his groan was low and rough against her neck. They moved together slowly, deliberately, learning each other, letting it build, and when the moment came, when her nails raked down his back, when her thighs locked around his waist, when she called his name like a promise, that was when he bit her, not to claim, but to bond. His teeth sank into her neck, just below the curve of her jaw, and her whole body shuddered. His scent flooded her senses, his soul pressed against hers, and hers opened for him. The bond snapped into place with a rush. Raw, wild, real. Their minds touched in a way no words could ever match. Her love, his devotion, her pain, his rage. And beneath it all, an anchor of comfort, so deep it almost hurt. She woke with the scent of him in her blood, and the hum of his thoughts tangled with her own. He lay beside her, arm wrapped around her waist, face buried in her hair. His bond mark glowed faintly on her skin. She traced it with her fingers. "I love you," she whispered. He stirred, then quietly, "I know. I felt it." She turned to him. "I want a life with you, a real one." His smile was slow and warm. "Then let's build it. Together." Epilogue. 6 months later, Aria opened her first Omega-run shelter for survivors of rejection, abuse, and trafficking. She used her platform not for power, but for protection. Kieran was always beside her, not as a shadow, but as a partner. Their bond remained strong, deep, voluntary, and every time he kissed her neck just above the bond mark, she smiled, because she remembered. She was never given freedom, she claimed it. And in the end, she didn't just survive, she chose to live and love on her terms. Everyone, thanks for watching. If you loved it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.